Language is just incredible, isn't it? So precise.
Absolutely.
But sometimes I think we just grab words that feel, well, close enough, you know? Like synonyms are totally interchangeable.
Right, like saying you're sad when maybe dejected or melancholy is closer to the mark.
Exactly. Or calling two things the same when really they're just equivalent in some way.
And it's in those tiny little differences, the ones we often gloss over, that you find the real clarity, the power.
Yeah. So how do you even navigate that? Choosing the perfect word when there are so many that seem, well, similar.
Well, that's where language becomes more than just getting a point across. It becomes almost an art form, doesn't it? And it's key for real understanding.
Yes, sir.
Because if you just rely on those near enough words, you risk being misunderstood, or your meaning gets muddy.
Or you just miss capturing that specific feeling or nuance you're aiming for, whether it's an emotion or, I don't know, a social situation. No. And that is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. We're trying to find a shortcut, maybe, to getting more precise with our language.
How are we doing that?
By going straight to a classic source, Webster's Dictionary of Synonyms and Antonyms. We've got a section, a really fascinating chunk of it, covering words from sacred all the way through to tact.
Ah, okay. So not just definitions, but exploring the relationships between words.
Exactly. It's like a master class in seeing how words that look similar on the surface are actually, well, different tools. Each one is calibrated for a specific job, a specific implication.
Understanding those distinctions is like, upgrading your whole linguistic toolkit. Suddenly you have more options, sharper tools.
That's the idea. So our mission today in this deep dive is to really unpack those subtle differences. Sometimes they're surprising, but they're always significant, I think. We want to explore why these words aren't just interchangeable copies of each other.
And how figuring out their specific flavors can really sharpen your own understanding and how you communicate.
Yeah, think of it as leveling up your word sense, maybe. Finding that perfect word you didn't even know you were looking for.
So by the end of this, hopefully, you, listening, will not only have a clearer grasp of these specific words,
Right.
but also maybe a better appreciation for just how precise language can be. It might empower you to choose that perfect word next time.
Okay, let's dive in. Let's unpack this fascinating material. We're starting with a group of words that all seem to be about setting something apart.
Right. Setting apart through reverence or protection or maybe some inherent quality.
Which brings us to sacred.
Yes, sacred and its relatives. Now, according to the source material, sacred really has two main vibes.
Okay.
First, it could mean setting something apart for a special use, often with a personal feeling, dedication, reverence.
Like the example they give.
Yeah, the battered chair by the fireside that was sacred to Father. It's not necessarily religious, but it's special, designated, cherished.
So it's got its own special spot, its own meaning to someone.
Yeah.
Dedicated.
Exactly. And the second meaning is, well, maybe a bit deeper. It implies a special quality that inspires real respect, almost a religious kind of reverence.
Like a sacred memory.
Precisely. It's not just a dedicated object. It's something imbued with a hallowed quality, something deeply respected.
And the source contrasts it with urban or citified.
Right, which really highlights that contrast. Sacred is set apart, revered, urban, citified. That's the everyday, the commonplace.
Makes sense. Okay, from sacred, the next word is sacrosanct. That sounds even more intense.
It does. And the source says it often does keep that religious overtone, meaning utmost sacredness, something inviolable.
But there's a twist.
There is, and this is really interesting. The source points out a key modern usage where it can be.
Well, ironic.
Ironic. How so?
It can suggest a supposed sacredness, something claimed to be sacred, rather than actually being sacred or earning that respect.
Oh, wow.
The example they give is quite pointed. Failed to accept that such public figures were sacrosanct. So it's questioning whether they really deserve that level of untouchable reverence.
Exactly. That duality is fascinating. So today, if someone calls something sacrosanct, you have to listen to the context.
Right. Are they saying it is genuinely, supremely sacred?
Or are they subtly suggesting that its claimed sacredness is maybe undeserved or questionable?
That potential for irony, for skepticism, really sets it apart from just plain sacred.
It does. Sacred doesn't inherently carry that baggage. Sacrosanct might.
All right. Sticking with this theme of being set apart or protected, we've got inviolate. What's the definition there?
Inviolate, the source tells us, usually applies to things like laws, agreements, maybe institutions, even people. Things that are secure from abuse or violation or injury.
Okay.
But the crucial point here is that it stresses the fact that it hasn't been violated. It's about the current state.
So the example helps here.
Yeah, the inviolate beauty of the wilderness. The idea is the wilderness has not been harmed or trespassed upon. It's still pristine.
Untouched. And its antonym is just violated. Simple enough.
Right. But then we get inviolable. Looks almost the same, sounds almost the same. This is where it gets tricky.
It is tricky. They're very close, and the source acknowledges that. But there's a subtle, important shift.
Okay.
While inviolate describes the state it hasn't been violated, inviolable implies an inherent character or quality that makes something secure from violation. It suggests it shouldn't or can't easily be violated.
Ah, okay. So the example is the inviolable sanctity of the law.
Exactly. The focus there isn't on whether the law has been broken. Laws get broken all the time.
Right.
It's about the law's inherent nature, its character, that resists violation or perhaps forbids it on principle.
I think I get it now. So, like a classified document locked in a vault might be inviolate if nobody's broken in yet.
Right. Its state is untouched.
But the principle of, say, diplomatic immunity might be considered inviolable, meaning it shouldn't be violated, even if someone technically could. That's a perfect way to illustrate the difference. It's the shift from the actual state of being untouched, inviolate, to the inherent quality or principle that resists being touched, inviolable.
So these words let us be really precise about why something is protected. Is it because it hasn't been harmed or because its very nature means it shouldn't be?
Exactly. It's that subtle but significant distinction.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, we've looked at things set apart by reverence or protection. Let's shift gears completely now.
Where are we headed?
Let's talk about feelings. Specifically, the language we use for those complex, sometimes kind of murky internal states, particularly unhappiness.
Ah, the shades of sadness. Yes, a rich area.
Where does the source start us off?
It starts with the most general term, naturally, sadness.
Okay.
And it notes that sadness just suggests low spirits. It doesn't really specify the cause or how deep it is or the exact, flavor of the sadness.
Just generally feeling down.
Right. The example is simple. A feeling of sadness marks the farewell dinner. It's the big umbrella term. Its antonym is gladness.
So sadness is the baseline. But life tends to throw more specific kinds of unhappiness our way, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Like depression. How does that differ?
Well, depression, according to the source, is a definite step away from just general sadness.
How so?
It suggests feeling let down, disheartened, maybe despondent, or even just drained, enervated.
Okay, a deeper lack of energy or spirit.
Yes, but here's the crucial part the source adds. It often implies a condition that might require care.
Ah.
The example makes this clear. Under a doctor's care for severe depression. This really lifts the word beyond just describing a mood.
Right, it suggests something potentially more serious, maybe even clinical, affecting you deeply.
Exactly. And its antonym, buoyancy, really highlights that lack of uplift, that heaviness.
That distinction, the potential need for care, is so important. It's definitely not just a synonym for very sad. Okay, what about melancholy? That word always sounds different. Poetic, almost.
It is distinct, and I think it's one of the most interesting nuances in this whole set. Melancholy implies a mood that's sad and serious.
Okay.
But, and this is the counterintuitive part, the source points out, it's not wholly unpleasant. It's a kind of pensiveness.
Not wholly unpleasant, sadness that isn't entirely bad.
Right. The example is old love letters that gave her cause for melancholy. It evokes that thoughtful, maybe wistful, nostalgic kind of sadness. Often involves reflection, looking back. It's not usually an actively painful or crushing feeling like deep sadness might be.
That's such a powerful difference, that specific feeling. Maybe looking at old photos or reading an old diary. There's sadness for what's gone, but also a quietness, maybe even a kind of comforting reflection.
Precisely. And its antonym, exhilaration, shows the lack of that uplifting joy.
Okay, so if that's melancholy, what's the difference between that and melancholia? They sound so similar.
The source is very clear that these are used differently. Melancholia applies to a disordered mental state. It's characterized by settled, deep depression.
Ah, so back to the clinical side.
Yes. The example is, fell into a state of melancholia after her husband's death. This is definitely in a more severe, perhaps clinical territory than melancholy.
So melancholy is that bittersweet, reflective mood.
Right.
while melancholia is a severe, settled clinical state of depression. That's a really critical distinction for clarity. Okay, what about dejection?
Dejection implies a mood, usually a passing mood, that's caused by some natural or logical reason.
Like getting bad news.
Exactly. The example is a struggling actor used to periods of dejection. The keys here are its temporary nature and the clear link to a specific cause. You failed an audition, you got rejected, something like that.
Temporary and linked to a cause. That makes sense. Its antonym is also exhilaration.
Yes, like depression and melancholy, it highlights that dip in spirits.
Okay. And the last one in this group, groom.
Gloom, the source says, is interesting because it can apply either to extreme sadness in a person,
Right.
or it can describe the atmosphere, the effect created by such a person or situation.
Oh, so it can be internal or external.
Exactly. The example, a universal gloom engulfed the devastated town, shows it describing a pervasive atmosphere of sadness. It captures both the deep internal feeling and its external manifestation or impact. An antonym is glee.
Wow. Okay, let's recap that. Just for feeling down, we have general low spirits, sadness, potentially clinical deep lack of energy, depression,
Right.
sad but reflective, maybe not entirely unpleasant, melancholy,
Yes.
a severe settled clinical state, melancholia,
Right.
a temporary dip caused by something specific, dejection,
Yep.
and finally, extreme sadness or the heavy atmosphere it creates, gloom.
That covers the spectrum.
It's incredible. Thinking about a time you felt unhappy, using these words gives you such precision. It's not just, I felt bad.
No, I felt a wave of dejection after that feedback, or there was a real melancholy air about the place.
Or a news just plunged the whole office into gloom. It really transforms how we describe internal states, makes them vivid, not vague.
Allows for much better self-awareness, and probably more empathy too.
Absolutely. Okay, from navigating our internal states, let's consider external states, specifically being free from danger or risk.
Ah, yes. The relationship between safe and secure.
Right. What does the source say about safe? Seems pretty straightforward.
It defines safe quite broadly. It can mean a risk has already been run without harm, like arrived home safe and sound.
Okay, survived something.
Or it can stress just being free from risk, generally kept her safe from harm.
Protected.
Or it can even describe something's character, something that minimizes risk, like safe investments.
Low risk. So its core is basically being free from harm or risk. Antonyms, dangerous, unsafe.
Pretty much. It covers surviving past danger and being protected from future danger.
So then how does secure differ? It feels similar.
It's similar, but secure, according to the source, usually stresses freedom from anxiety or apprehension about danger or risk.
Ah, the feeling.
Yes. And crucially, this feeling is based on grounds that appear sound and sufficient. There's a reason for the confidence.
Okay, explain that more.
The example is, reached a secure harbor before the storm broke. The ship is physically safe from the storm in the harbor,
Right.
but the word secure adds that layer of confidence, the lack of worry, because the harbor is seen as stable, sufficient protection.
That's it. That's the key difference. Safe is about the physical reality being free from harm, but
Right.
secure adds the psychological dimension, the feeling of confidence, the lack of anxiety, because you believe you're truly protected.
Precisely. You could be physically safe, say you're hidden in a really sturdy bunker during an attack,
Okay.
but you might not feel secure if you doubt the bunker will hold, or you worry about what happens when you have to leave it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Conversely, you might feel secure. Maybe you trust a business partner completely,
Uh-huh.
but you might not actually be safe if that partner is secretly undermining you and creating a dangerous situation.
Wow. That's a critical distinction. It captures both the objective reality and the subjective feeling about it.
It really does. That perceived sufficiency of the protection, the grounds for confidence, that's central to secure.
Okay, moving from being free from risk. Let's dive into words that describe different kinds or degrees of a likeness, being identical or equivalent.
The nuances of sameness. This is a great set. It starts naturally with the broadest term, same.
Okay.
The source explains same can mean two things. Either the things you're talking about are actually one and the same thing.
The single item,
Right.
right?
Or it can mean they're distinct things, but there's no appreciable difference between them. They look or function alike enough.
So the example covers both.
Exactly. We took the same route on the same day. The route is one thing, the same route. but the days are distinct yet identical for the purpose of the sentence. The same kind of day in this context. Antonym is different.
Okay, so same can be a bit ambiguous. Is it literally the one thing or just one that looks exactly like it? How do we clear that up?
That's where self-same comes in handy. The source is clear. Self-same always implies that things are one thing, not two or more that are just alike.
Always one thing.
Yes. The example is, it was the self-same ring I had lost years ago. No ambiguity there. It is that exact ring, the original one. Its antonym is diverse.
Self-same really locks down that absolute identity. What about using very, like the very thing?
The source puts very in a similar category to self-same.
Well,
It implies identity, and it's often used for emphasis.
like the example.
You're the very person I've been looking for. It points emphatically to that single specific individual. No other person will do.
Okay, so self, same, and very both hammer home that absolute singular identity. What about identical? That also feels like exactly alike.
Identical is interesting. It can imply self-sameness, like the self-same thing,
Okay.
but it can also just suggest absolute agreement in all details, even if the things are technically separate entities.
Like copies.
Exactly. The example, their test answers were identical, is perfect. They were the self-same piece of paper,
Yep.
obviously.
Right.
But the content, every answer, maybe even every cross T, was exactly the same in every single detail. Perfect copies. Its antonyms are non-identical and diverse.
Okay, so identical can mean the actual thing, or perfect copies down to the last detail. That's different from just same, which only requires appreciable similarity.
Right.
Now, how do equivalent and equal fit into this picture? They feel like they're about sameness of value or amount.
You're right. That's their focus. Equivalent implies amounting to the same thing, not necessarily in shape or form, but in worth or significance.
That the house example.
Yeah, two houses of equivalent market value. The houses are obviously different buildings, maybe look totally different.
Sure.
But their monetary value is considered the same. They're equivalent in that specific aspect value. Antonym is different.
So equal value, not necessarily equal appearance or identity. And equal, how's that different from equivalent?
Equal implies correspondence in value, magnitude, or some specified quality. So it implies equivalence, but it focuses more broadly on being the same in specific measurable or qualitative ways,
Like the example.
divided into equal shares. That shows correspondence in quantity or size.
Yeah.
It's about having the same measure of something. Its antonym is unequal.
Okay, that set lays it out so clearly. There's a whole spectrum. Being the single exact thing, self-same, very, being indistinguishable in every detail, whether it's one thing or perfect copies, identical.
Right.
And then just being the same in value or amount or quality, equivalent, equal.
Exactly.
Understanding that is so important for avoiding confusion, especially if you're talking about comparisons or value or copies versus originals.
It really is. It's the difference between saying, I bought the same shirt, meaning another one just like it, versus I found the self-same shirt I lost, meaning the actual lost item. Precision matters.
It absolutely does. Okay, let's shift again. Now let's turn to words that have a bit of an edge. Words for criticism or scorn, often delivered through language.
The sharp edges of communication. Yes. This brings us to sarcastic and its related terms.
Where does the source start? Sarcastic.
Yes. It defines sarcastic as applying to language, remarks, etc., that intentionally inflict pain, usually by deriding, taunting, or ridiculing someone.
Intentional pain.
That's the key. The example is a critic famous for his sarcastic remarks. The defining feature is the deliberate intent to wound, to hurt someone with mockery.
So sarcasm is using critique or humor specifically to cause personal hurt. Okay, what about satiric? That feels related but different.
It is related, but the intent is usually different and often broader. Satiric implies an intent to censure by ridicule and reprobation.
Censure, like criticize society.
Often, yes. The example is a satiric look at contemporary sexual mores. The goal of satire is typically societal or moral critique, using ridicule to expose flaws in groups, institutions, or social norms.
So it's less about hurting one specific person's feelings
Right.
and more about criticizing a bigger target, like society or a type of behavior. Both use ridicule, but the target and purpose are different.
Exactly. Personal pain versus societal critique.
Okay. How about ironic? This word feels like it gets thrown around a lot, maybe misused sometimes.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
The source defines ironic as implying an attempt to be amusing or provocative by saying something that is startlingly or surprisingly different from, and often the opposite of, what is actually meant.
the classic definition, like the example.
Yeah, the source gives a great one. Made the ironic observation that the government could always be trusted.
Huh. Perfect. So irony is all about that gap, that contrast between the literal words and the intended meaning, often for a witty or pointed effect.
Yes, it's about that inversion of meaning. It's not necessarily aimed at causing pain like sarcasm, though it certainly can be cutting, depending on the context.
The core is the contrast, the saying the opposite thing. Got it. Okay, the last one in this group. Sardonic.
Sardonic implies a scornful, mocking, or derisive disbelief or doubt. And this can be shown verbally or even just facially.
Disbelief and doubt.
Okay. The example is, surveyed the scene with a sardonic smile. This word carries a really strong sense of bitter cynicism, or maybe weary doubt, a kind of bleak amusement.
So it's not just mocking, it's mocking with a heavy dose of bitterness or cynicism or fatalism.
Exactly. That element of bitter, scornful doubt is what really sets it apart from simple sarcasm or even irony.
That set gives us such a powerful way to analyze critical language. When you hear a cutting remark or read something critical, you can ask, okay, what's the real intent here? Is it trying to cause personal pain, sarcastic? Is it critiquing society, satiric? Is it saying the opposite of what's meant, maybe for effect, ironic?
Or is it expressing that bitter, scornful disbelief, sardonic?
Yeah. Understanding these helps you get the speaker's actual tone and intention much more accurately.
And it helps us choose the right word ourselves, if we need to be critical, to make sure our own message lands the way we intend it to.
Absolutely. Okay, from the sharpness of words, let's move to, well, the opposite end maybe. Words describing having too much of something, being overly full, sometimes to the point of disgust.
The language of excess. Yes, this group explores the consequences of overindulgence or oversupply. We start with satiate, or the shorter form, sate.
Satiate or setse.
Okay. The source notes they can sometimes just mean complete satisfaction. You've had enough, you're full content.
But that's not the main meaning.
More often, the source says they suggest a fullness that has actually destroyed interest or desire. You've had so much you don't want any more.
Okay, the examples show that shift.
I do. Movies that purported to satiate their appetite for violence,
Yeah.
that suggests fulfilling a desire,
Right.
but then audiences were sated with dizzying visual effects. That implies they'd had so much they were probably bored or uninterested.
Ah, okay. So it's reaching fullness, but in a way that kills the desire for more. Often implies boredom or weariness as a result.
Exactly. It goes beyond just satisfaction into that loss of appetite or interest because you're completely full. Next up is surfeit.
Surfeit. How does that build on satiate?
Surfeit implies fullness to the point of nausea or disgust. It's a stronger, more physical reaction.
Like the example.
Surfeited themselves with junk food. It implies active discomfort, maybe even revulsion, from having consumed way too much. Its antonym is wet, meaning to stimulate appetite.
A much more visceral reaction to excess. Got it. Following that is cloy.
Cloy stresses the feeling that results from that kind of surfeiting the disgust or boredom.
So it's the feeling itself.
Yes. The exact sentimental pictures that cloy after a while shows it's not just about food. It's that negative feeling, the disgust, the boredom that arises when something becomes sickeningly sweet or excessive or just overdone. Also contrasted with wet.
Okay, so surfeit is the state of being overfull to disgust, and cloy is the feeling of disgust or boredom caused by it. Makes sense. What about Paul?
Paul emphasizes the loss of ability to stimulate interest or appetite. Something just doesn't excite you anymore.
Like the example.
Even a tropical paradise begins to pall after 10 trips. It focuses purely on that waning interest. The feeling that something once desirable or exciting has just become dull, tedious.
So maybe less intense than disgust or nausea, just it's lost its appeal, it's flat.
Exactly. The excitement is flattened out. Then we have glut.
Glut, how does that fit in?
Glut implies an excess in feeding or supplying that actually chokes or impedes something. It blocks things up.
So it's not just about eating.
No. The example bookstores glutted with diet books shows it applies beyond consumption. It's about an oversupply in a market or system that creates a blockage, a problem. Its antonym is stint, meaning to be sparing or hold back.
Overabundance causing a problem. Okay, and finally, gorge.
Gorge suggests a glutting to the point of bursting or choking. It's extreme.
Like the example.
Gorge themselves with chocolate. Gives a really strong, almost violent visual of extreme overconsumption, pushing physical limits.
Wow. This set really paints a vivid picture of too much. We go from satisfying desire to the point you lose interest, satiate,
Yeah.
to actual physical nausea, surfeit,
Right.
to the feeling of disgust or boredom that results,
Yeah.
Floyd, to
Yeah.
simply losing its power to stimulate or interest you, Paul,
Uh-huh.
to an oversupply causing blockage,
Right.
glut, and finally that extreme bursting point consumption, gorge. It's a whole vocabulary for the downsides of excess.
It really captures that idea that after a certain point, more isn't just enough, it's actually bad in various ways.
Definitely. Okay, let's shift gears again. This time, let's look at words describing careful looking or examination, how we observe things.
Right, the act of observation, starting with scrutinize.
Scrutinize, that sounds intense.
It is. The source stresses applying close observation and attention to minute detail, really examining closely.
Like the example.
Closely scrutinize the bill from the hospital.
Yeah.
It implies a thorough, painstaking look at every little item, every detail.
Like putting it under a microscope. How does that compare to scan? That feels like the opposite.
It pretty much is on this spectrum. Scan implies surveying something from point to point, often suggesting a cursory overall observation. Quick look.
Yeah, like the example, quickly scan the wine list. You're just getting a general overview, glancing rapidly, not dwelling on the details of each wine.
Exactly. Slow and detailed, scrutinize, versus fast and general scan.
Okay, what about inspect? Where does that fit?
Inspect implies a searching, scrutinizing, but specifically for errors or defects. There's a purpose.
Ah, looking for flaws.
Yes. The example is inspected the restaurant for health code violations. You're doing detailed looking, but with the specific goal of finding what's wrong, what's faulty, what's not compliant.
So it's detailed looking like scrutinize, but with a specific purpose. Find the errors.
Yeah.
And examine. Is that similar?
Similar to being detailed, but with a different purpose. Examine suggests scrutinizing or investigating in order to determine the nature, condition, or quality of something.
Okay, so figuring out what it is or what state it's in.
Right. The example is examine the gems to see whether they were genuine. The purpose here is determining the quality, the authenticity, the condition.
The distinctions here are really sharp. It's about the level of detail, deep scrutinize versus shallow scan. And then for the detailed looking, what's the purpose? Finding errors, inspect. Or determining nature, quality, examine.
Exactly. So you scrutinize a contract for every loophole. You might inspect a report for typos. You examine evidence to determine its validity.
Yeah.
And you scan headlines to see what's new.
These verbs really define the type of attention you're paying. Not just that you looked, but how and why.
Precisely. They add that layer of intent.
Agreed. Okay, from looking closely, let's move into the shadows. Let's consider actions done without attracting attention, the subtle world of secrets.
Ah, the nuances of secrecy.
Yeah.
Yes, this set provides a rich vocabulary for different kinds of concealment, starting with the most general, secret.
Secret. Pretty basic.
Yeah, it implies concealment on any grounds for any motive. Very broad. The example is just a secret meeting. It's the catch-all term for keeping something hidden or unknown.
Okay, the general term. What about covert? That sounds more official.
It often is. Covert stresses the fact of not being open or declared. It's not publicly acknowledged.
Like the example.
Covert operations against guerrilla forces. Its antonym is overt. These are actions often planned by governments or organizations. They aren't secret from everyone involved, maybe, but they aren't announced to the public.
So, not openly declared, often official, but undisclosed.
Got it. Stealthy. That makes me think of ninjas.
Huh. Yeah, it suggests taking pains to avoid being seen or heard, especially when doing something wrong or illicit.
Quiet movement.
Right. The example, the stealthy movements of a cat burglar, highlights the deliberate quietness and careful movement aimed at avoiding detection, usually with a negative purpose.
Quiet, careful movement to avoid being caught, often for bad reasons.
Yeah.
Furtive. How's that different? Furtive implies a sly or cautious stealthiness. It often relates to hidden emotions or small, quick actions.
It's all shifty.
Yeah, maybe a bit shifty or nervous or guilty. The example exchanged furtive smiles across the room shows it well. It's about hiding something, often with that sly or cautious quality. Its antonyms include forthright and brazen.
Sly, shifty secrecy, often about hidden feelings or small actions. Okay, clandestine, that sounds serious.
It usually is. Clandestine implies secrecy usually for an evil or illicit purpose, crime-related.
Definitely negative.
Yes, the example, a clandestine drug deal in a back alley, gives it a strong link to illegality, crime, wicked activities. Its antonym is open,
Strongly tied to illegal or evil stuff. Okay. How about surreptitious? That's a great word.
It is. Surreptitious applies to actions done secretly, often with skillful avoidance of detection, and usually in violation of custom, law, or authority.
Skillful rule breaking in secret.
Kinda, yeah. The example compromised his diet with surreptitious snacking is a nice, relatable one. It combines the stealth, the breaking of rules, the diet, and a sense of being clever or skillful in not getting caught. Antonym is brazen.
Secretly breaking rules, skillfully avoiding detection. Got it. And the last one here, underhanded.
Underhanded specifically stresses fraudulent or deceptive intent. It's about dishonesty.
Trickery?
Exactly. The example, a car dealership guilty of underhanded practices focuses on the trickery, the dishonesty, the unfairness, and the secret action, often used in business or dealings. Its antonym is above board.
Wow. This vocabulary lets us be incredibly specific about what kind of secrecy is going on.
It really does.
Is it just hidden, secret, not openly declared covert, involving quiet movement to avoid being caught, stealthy?
Mm-hmm.
Does it have that sly, shifty quality, furtive? Is it strictly for illegal or evil purposes, clandestine?
Right.
Does it involve skillfully breaking rules, surreptitious? Or is it fundamentally dishonest and tricky, underhanded?
Knowing the difference completely changes the implication, the feel of the hidden action. It reveals the motive and the method behind the secrecy.
Absolutely fantastic. Okay, let's move from hiding things to maybe the most fundamental act of all, perceiving the world around us, the act of seeing. This is like a really big group of words.
It is. The source goes into incredible detail here about the many facets of perception, both physical and mental. We start, of course, with the foundation, see.
See? Simple, right.
Well, the basic meaning is simple, using your eyes to get visual impressions. He cannot see the crowd, for he is blind.
Physical sight.
Right. But the source points out that more often see implies something broader. It can mean recognition or appreciation, like went to see a ball game.
Okay, experiencing something visually.
Or it can mean using your imagination, mental sight. I can see her plainly now, meaning I understand, or I can picture her.
Mental visualization.
Or it can imply using your powers of inference, figuring something out. I could see he was inwardly agitated, meaning I deduced or perceived his state from clues.
So see is incredibly broad. Physical sight, understanding, imagining, inferring. Wow. Okay, what about behold? That feels much more grand.
Active.
It does feel more active. Behold, the source says, carries a stronger implication of actually using your eyes and having a distinct recognition. It suggests looking more intently at what is seen, maybe even with awe.
Like the example.
Never beheld such beauty. It implies not just seeing, but looking actively, taking it in, recognizing its striking quality. It's a more deliberate, impactful visual act than just see.
Looking with real intention and clear recognition. Okay, how about words for seeing something that's, like, hard to spot? Descry.
Descry often suggests an effort to discover something or looking out for it, despite difficulties, maybe distance or darkness or it's hidden.
So it's about the effort involved.
Yeah. The example could barely descry his form in the gathering darkness, implies a struggle, trying hard to make something out visually against obstacles.
Seeing something difficult to perceive because of conditions and espy. Is that similar? Similar context, maybe. But espy usually implies skill in detection. Spotting something small or unclear, or maybe something trying not to be seen.
Ah, skill.
Yes. The example, at last espied the narrow path along the cliff, focuses on the observer's ability. Their skill in finally spotting something elusive or hidden.
So both involve seeing with difficulty, but descry is more about the effort needed due to conditions, while espy highlights the observer's skill in detection.
Got it. Let's move to looking at things more analytically, maybe. View.
View usually implies seeing something, mentally or physically, that's spread out before you, something you can examine in detail.
Okay.
And the source adds it often implies a particular way of looking or having a specific purpose in mind.
Like the painting example.
Exactly. View a painting from various angles. It suggests examining it systematically or from different perspectives or with a specific analytical goal.
Looking at something broadly or from a particular angle or with a specific purpose. And survey. How's that different? Survey often implies a more detailed scrutiny or inspection by eye or mind, so you get a picture of something as a whole. The big picture.
Comprehensive look.
Yes. The example, carefully surveyed the scene before entering the room, emphasizes taking in the entire layout, the whole situation, often systematically before acting.
Looking at the whole picture, often in detail, to understand it fully. Okay. How about seeing that involves more thought, reflection, like contemplate?
Contemplate definitely brings in the thinking element. It implies fixing your eyes on something, but doing so in abstraction or enjoyment, or maybe thinking about some goal related to it.
Like the sunset
A
example.
relaxed moment contemplating the sunset.
That captures it beautifully. It's seeing, yes, but combined with reflection or pleasure or considering its meaning or significance.
Seeing and thinking deeply about it. Okay, what about words focusing on just paying attention? Observe.
Observe implies heeding something, not just letting it pass by unnoticed. It often carries an implication of directed attention, focusing.
Like the example, closely observe their reaction. It suggests focusing intently on something specific, to notice details, changes, how something unfolds.
Paying close, directed attention, noticing the details. How about notice? That seems simpler.
Notice often implies having some definite reaction to what you see or hear or feel, like making a mental note or remarking on it. Something registers.
So you perceive it and it triggers a response.
Right. The example, notice with alarm, that the door was unlocked, shows the perception, seeing the unlocked door, leads directly to a reaction, alarm. It registered as significant.
Registering a perception and reacting to it, how is remark different from notice?
Remark tends to add a layer of judgment or commentary. It suggests registering your impression mentally and then judging or criticizing what you noticed.
Evaluation comes in.
Yes. The example, disdainfully remark the apparent camaraderie between them, shows noticing something, the camaraderie, and then immediately forming and maybe expressing a judgment about it. Disdainfully remark.
Noticing something and then evaluating or commenting on it, maybe critically. Okay. And note, like taking notes.
Pretty much. Note often suggests recording your impressions, whether just mentally or maybe in writing, or even saying it aloud to remember.
Like the map example.
He carried a map and noted every stream and every hill that we passed. The key is recording the observation for future use or reference, documenting what you see.
Recording the observation. Okay, moving towards deeper mental processing now. Perceive.
Perceive carries a strong implication of using the mind during observation. It's about apprehending, getting knowledge, not just through sight, but potentially through any of the senses.
Mind and senses working together.
Yes. And the source notes it often suggests keen mental vision, special insight, really understanding something.
Like the examples.
Perceive the rock to be made of granite, using senses and prior knowledge to understand its nature. Or was able to perceive the danger of their situation, using insight to grasp a reality that wasn't obvious on the surface.
So it's a broad term for grasping something, understanding its nature or meaning, often with insight. Got it. And the last one in this massive set, discern.
Discern, like descry, can just mean making something out with your eyes, like discerned an eagle high overhead.
Okay.
But the source says its more distinctive meaning implies using the powers of deeply perceiving and distinguishing, or discriminating between things.
Distinguishing, making fine judgments.
Exactly. The example, tried hard to discern her meaning, shows it's often about understanding subtle differences, grasping underlying meanings, making fine distinctions, especially with abstract ideas or intentions.
Understanding subtle differences in meaning. Wow, that is an incredible range just for the act of seeing.
It really shows how complex perception is.
And the source helpfully gives that simpler contrast too, right? See, look, and watch.
Yes, as a more basic everyday set. In that context, see is just receiving visual impressions. She sees well with her new glasses.
What's the input?
Look. Stress is directing your eyes. Look long and hard at his receding form, actively pointing your eyes. And watch implies following something with your eyes, observing it continuously, watching the clock, watching a performance.
That simpler set clarifies the basics, but that whole deep dive into seeing, it's amazing. It shows perception isn't just passive.
Not at all.
It can be effortless reception, see? Intentional gazing, a behold, struggling to find, descry, skillfully detecting a spy, examining with purpose, view, examine, taking in the whole scene, survey, seeing with reflection, contemplate,
Right.
focusing attention, observe, noticing with a reaction or judgment, notice, remark, recording it, note,
Keep going.
grasping with mind and senses, perceive, or understanding fine distinctions, discern. Knowing these lets you articulate exactly how you're interacting with the visual world.
It gives you the vocabulary to match the real nuance of how we perceive things.
Absolutely incredible. Okay, from how we perceive, let's think briefly about how things appear to us, which, as we know, isn't always how they are.
Yes. Appearance versus reality. This brings us to seem, look, and appear.
Where does seem fit?
Seem, the source suggests, usually implies an opinion based on subjective impressions. Your personal reaction, your feeling about something,
Like the example.
seem to be strong and healthy.
Yeah.
It's based on your feeling, your interpretation. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but that's the impression you get.
Based on a personal subjective feeling.
Okay, what about look?
Look implies an opinion based more on the general visual impression, what you see on the surface.
Purely visual.
Right. The example is looked exactly like his picture. It's based directly on the outward visual evidence compares to something else visual.
Based just on what you see externally.
Okay.
And appear. How's that different?
Appear can mean the same as look, based on visual impression.
But the source adds, it often suggests an obviously distorted or potentially misleading impression. There's a hint that things might not be as they are presented.
Ah, that's the key nuance. Appear carries that potential for inaccuracy or even deception.
Exactly. The example, an explanation that appeared to be true, carries that slight shadow of doubt. It looked true on the surface, but maybe it wasn't really.
So something might look true based on the visuals. It might seem true based on your gut feeling. But if it appeared true, you might want to double check.
That's a good way to think about it. This set is really useful when you're talking about impressions versus reality, acknowledging that what we perceive, seem, look, or what's presented, appear, might not be the whole truth.
Definitely. Okay, shifting from perception. Let's look at words describing being set apart or chosen, often because of some quality.
Right, the idea of being selected. This set revolves around the word select.
Select. What are its meanings?
The source gives it two main senses. First, it can refer to something chosen with discrimination, picked out in preference to others.
Like the example.
The hotel caters to a select clientele. They've been chosen, or they choose the hotel, based on certain criteria.
Okay, chosen deliberately. And the second meaning.
It can just mean superior or exceptional without necessarily implying an active choice was made right then, like aimed at a select audience, meaning a discerning, maybe high-quality audience.
So either chosen because it's good, or just good enough to be chosen or considered special. Antonym is indiscriminate. Got it. How about elect? That sounds similar to chosen.
Elect stresses the idea of being chosen, yes, but it carries a strong implication of being admitted to a restricted or inner circle, often one with special privilege.
Ah, chosen for a specific group.
Exactly. The example is considered herself among the elect. It's not just being chosen generally, it's being chosen into a particular, often exclusive or privileged group.
Chosen for the inner circle. Okay. What about picked? Like picked teams.
Yeah, picked commonly applies to what is conspicuously superior. It often suggests being the best available option.
The top choice.
Right. The example, the candidates were all picked citizens,
Mm-hmm.
implies they were chosen because they were seen as the absolute best, the most superior individuals from the pool of candidates.
Being chosen specifically because you are the best. Got it. And then exclusive. This word feels like it carries extra baggage sometimes.
It often does. Fundamentally, exclusive implies setting apart or ruling out whatever isn't compatible. Like mutually exclusive demands, one rules out the other.
Okay.
But when you apply it to people or groups, the source notes, it very often suggests a feeling of superiority is the reason for ruling others out, keeping people out because they're felt to be beneath the group's standards.
Ah, the act of exclusion based on perceived superiority.
Exactly. The example, membership in an exclusive club, highlights this. It's not just that the members are good, select, or picked. It's that the club actively excludes others, often based on that sense of being better or more privileged. Its antonym, naturally, is inclusive.
That distinction is really important. The other words here, select, elect, picked, are mostly about being chosen for a positive quality.
Right.
But exclusive is often about defining a group by its perceived superiority and the resulting act of keeping others out. It reveals very different motivations for being set apart.
It really shows that being part of a select group isn't necessarily the same as being part of an exclusive one. One's about quality, the other is often about identity through exclusion.
Good point. Okay, let's turn our attention inward again. Let's think about how we respond to the world through our senses and feelings, the raw input, and how we process it.
Right. This involves sensation, sense, feeling, and sensibility. Starting with sensation.
Like a physical feeling.
It can be just that. The source says it might focus just on the fact of perception, through the senses, maybe without even comprehending it.
Right.
Like felt a tingling sensation, just the raw physical input.
Okay.
But it often suggests more. Recognition plus intellectual and emotional reactions, like bothered by the sensation that he's being ignored. That's not just physical. It involves thought and emotion reacting to a perceived situation.
So it can range from simple physical input, like touch, to a complex internal reaction involving thoughts and feelings.
Got it. What about sense?
Sense can be like sensation. A sense of chill crept over them.
Okay.
Or it can refer specifically to the basic perceptive powers, the sense of smell.
Right, the five senses.
But in its typical use for responding to things, the source says it stresses intellectual awareness and full consciousness. You're processing it consciously.
More emphasis on the thinking part.
Yes. Like a sense of frustration. You're aware of the feeling, you're processing it intellectually, not just experiencing a raw input.
More conscious processing and awareness. Okay. How about feeling? That seems like a very broad word.
It is quite broad. The source says it can apply to sensations perceived through the skin touch, heat, cold, pressure, like no feeling in her fingers.
Physical touch.
Or it can describe a complex response involving sensation, emotion, and thought. Like had a vague feeling of unease. That's a mix of things.
Body, mind, emotions all involved. Right. Or feeling can even refer to the power to respond itself, the capacity to feel, like a sentient feeling being.
So it covers physical touch, complex internal states, and even the basic ability to experience anything at all. Very broad. Okay, finally, sensibility.
Sensibility often takes the place of feeling when talking about the power to respond. But the source highlights that it's especially used when implying a keenly impressionable nature, someone who feels things deeply.
Like the example.
A creature of great sensibility. It can also suggest excessive or affected responsiveness, though, like made a great show of effete sensibilities, being overly dramatic about feelings.
So it focuses on the quality of responsiveness, being highly impressionable, which could be good or bad, or maybe overly emotional. Its antonym is insensibility.
Exactly. It's about the degree or style of feeling.
These words give us such a powerful way to describe the different layers of internal experience. Are you talking about the simple physical input, sensation, the conscious recognition and processing sense, a complex state involving body, mind, and emotion, or the basic capacity to feel feeling,
Right.
or the quality of responsiveness, how impressionable or emotional someone is, sensibility? This really helps articulate the richness of our inner world.
It moves us beyond just saying, I felt something, to describing the precise nature of that internal experience.
Yeah.
Much clearer.
Agreed. Okay, following internal states, let's look at the opposite maybe. Words that describe things coming apart, being separated or disunited in different ways.
The vocabulary of breaking connections, yes. We start with the most general term here. Separate.
Separate, broad.
Very. It can imply disunion for any number of reasons.
Yeah.
Maybe things drift apart, maybe one is removed, maybe something comes between them. The example is separated her personal life from her career. Just keeping things apart. Its antonym is combine.
The general term for coming apart or keeping apart.
Yeah.
How about part, as in parting ways?
Exactly. Part implies separating things or people from a close union or association, breaking ties.
Like the friends example.
An argument that parted the friends permanently. It focuses specifically on breaking those close emotional ties, relationships, associations. Its antonym is unite.
Bringing a close connection. Well, divide, like dividing a cake.
Yeah, divide implies separating something into pieces, groups, or sections by cutting or breaking or branching.
Like the Civil War example.
Civil War divided the nation. It focuses on that fragmentation, splitting into smaller parts or factions, also contrasted with unite.
Splitting into pieces or sections. Okay. Sever. That sounds harsh.
It usually implies violence, especially when removing a part or a member from something.
Definitely physical often.
Often, yes. The example is grim. His arm had been severed by a chainsaw. It carries that strong connotation of violent cutting off.
Violent cutting off.
Got it. Sunder also sounds pretty violent.
It does. Sunder suggests a violent rending or wrenching apart. Tearing.
Like the friendship example. A friendship sundered only by death. Similar to sever in implying violence, but maybe sunder emphasizes more the tearing, splitting, or wrenching motion.
Yeah.
Often applied to things like relationships or concepts forcefully torn apart.
Violent tearing or wrenching apart.
Mm.
Okay. And the last one here is divorce. We usually think of marriage, but the source uses it more broadly.
Yes. In this context, divorce implies separating two things that normally interact and belong together, breaking a functional link.
Like the science and morals example.
Would divorce scientific research from moral responsibility.
Hmm.
It shows its use for breaking a functional or natural or expected connection between two ideas or entities that are typically seen as intertwined.
This set gives us a whole spectrum for separation. Is it just general disunion, separate,
Mm-hmm.
breaking close ties, part, splitting into fragments, divide, violent cutting off, sever,
Right.
violent tearing apart, sunder, or breaking a functional connection that normally exists, divorce?
Knowing these helps describe how things came apart and the nature of the connection that was broken. Adds a lot of color.
Definitely adds clarity. Okay, let's move from separation to words describing attitudes or states that are, well, not light or frivolous. The weight of seriousness.
Ah, the various flavors of seriousness. Yes. The source starts with serious itself, the most general term,
Serious, meaning
implying a concern for what really matters, focusing on important issues, not trivial ones. The example contrasts Gothic romances with serious fiction. Its antonyms are light, flippant.
the core idea, focusing on important stuff. How about grave, like a grave situation?
The grave implies both seriousness and dignity. There's a weightiness to it, a formal bearing.
Like the example.
Read the pronouncement in a grave voice. It evokes that sense of weight, solemnity, formal dignity. Its antonym is gay, in the older sense of lighthearted.
Seriousness combined with dignity. Okay, solemn, like a solemn oath.
Solemn suggests an impressive gravity that is utterly free from levity. No humor at all.
Totally serious.
Yes. Deep seriousness and formality. The example, the solemn occasion of a coronation, highlights this. Often used for significant rituals or very serious events where humor would be inappropriate.
Deep, formal seriousness, no trace of humor. Got it. Sedate.
Sedate implies a composed and decorous seriousness, calm and proper.
Like the bride example.
Amidst the frenzy of activity, the bride remains sedate. It focuses on that calm, proper, dignified behavior that reflects an inner steadiness and seriousness, especially when things around might be chaotic. Antonym is flighty.
Calm, proper, composed seriousness. Okay. Staid. That sounds a bit stiff.
It can imply that. Staid suggests a settled, accustomed sedateness. It may be a prim self-restraint. It's often habitual.
Like the dinner party example.
Her dinner parties were staid affairs.
Yeah.
It implies a habitual, perhaps slightly rigid or old-fashioned seriousness and restraint as part of someone's character or routine. Antonym is unstaid.
Habitual, maybe a bit reserved or stiff. Seriousness. Okay. Sober. Not just about alcohol, right?
Definitely not. In this context, sober stresses a seriousness of purpose and a complete absence of levity or frivolity. Thoughtful, realistic,
Like the example.
an objective and sober look at the situation. It focuses on thoughtful, realistic, unfrivolous consideration or demeanor, often tied to assessing facts or making plans. Its antonym is also gay.
Seriousness focused on purpose, free from frivolity. Okay, last one in this set. Honest.
Earnest suggests sincerity and often a zealousness of purpose, real feeling behind it.
Like the Bible example.
An earnest attempt at dramatizing the Bible.
Yeah.
It adds that dimension of genuine feeling, deep sincerity, and focused, maybe even zealous effort toward a goal. Its antonym is frivolous.
This set gives us such precise ways to describe the quality of seriousness. Is it just about importance? Serious. Does it have dignity? Grave. Is it totally humorless and formal? Solemn. Is it calm and proper? Sedate. Is it a settled habit? Maybe a bit stiff? Staid. Is it purposeful and non-frivolous? Sober. Or is it marked by deep sincerity and zeal? Honest. These words really let us differentiate the motivations and the outward signs of seriousness.
They move us beyond just saying someone is serious to describing how or why they are serious. Much richer.
Definitely. And our final step for this deep dive, this brings us to social skills, navigating interactions with others, the world of tact.
Ah, yes. Social grace and competence. This is where language helps us describe being adept at dealing with people. We start with tact itself.
Tact, what's the core idea?
The source implies it's a delicate and considerate perception of what is fit or appropriate or suitable in a particular situation, especially delicate ones.
Like the divorce example.
Use tact when introducing the subject of her divorce. The core is that sensitivity to others' feelings, knowing what to say or do or not say or do, to handle potentially awkward or painful situations gracefully.
Being sensitive and appropriate, especially in tricky social moments.
God.
What about address, like a person of fine address?
Exactly. Address suggests ease and grace in social intercourse generally. Just being smooth and comfortable interacting with people.
Like the example.
A person of charming address. It describes someone who is generally smooth, comfortable, skillful in social situations, making others feel at ease. Overall social grace.
General social grace and ease. Okay, how about poise? That feels more internal, maybe.
It connects to internal qualities, yes. Poise suggests a dignified and assured bearing that comes from self-possession, from being comfortable and confident in company.
Like the example shows.
Met the unexpected question with perfect poise. It highlights that inner confidence and composure that shows outwardly, especially when facing challenges or pressure in a social setting. Staying cool.
Inner confidence showing his outward composure, especially under pressure.
Um,
Okay, and the last one, savoir-faire, French.
Right. From the French, knowing how to do, and that's basically what it implies. Knowing what to do or say. Possessing sensitivity to social situations and the practical know how to navigate them.
Practical competence.
Yes. The example had just the right savoir-faire for a successful hostess. Illustrates that practical social competence. Having the right instincts, knowing how to handle things, making social situations work smoothly. Quick thinking in context.
This final set really lays out different facets of social skill beautifully. Tact is that specific sensitivity and appropriateness for delicate moments. Address is more about general social grace and ease.
Right.
Poise is about that self-assured composure, especially under pressure.
Yes.
And savoir-faire is the practical competence, knowing exactly what to do or say to handle a situation well.
It sums it up nicely.
So when you admire someone's social skills, you can think, which of these really captures what I'm admiring? Is it their delicate handling of a tough topic, tact, their overall smoothness, address, their calm in a crisis, poise, or their knack for just knowing the right thing to do to make an event successful, savoir-faire?
They give us the language to appreciate those different kinds of social excellence.
Absolutely. Well, we have journeyed through an incredible range of word sets today, all guided by the precision of Webster's Dictionary of Synonyms and Antonyms.
It's been quite a tour.
We've looked at words for setting things apart as sacred, the many shades of unhappiness, safety versus security, degrees of sameness, the sharp edges of criticism.
The downsides of excess, different ways of looking and examining, the nuances of secrecy, that huge landscape of seeing and perceiving.
Appearance versus reality, being set apart by quality, how we sense and feel, how things come apart, the qualities of seriousness.
And finally, those essential skills for navigating social waters.
It's been a deep dive into just one small section of the language, really, but the pattern seems clear, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Words that seem similar are actually distinct tools. Each one carries unique implications, context, power.
And understanding these nuances, pulling them directly from a source that's all about careful language use,
Yeah.
it's so much more than just, boosting your vocabulary count.
It really is. It's about gaining the ability to think more clearly.
Yeah, and to articulate your thoughts, your feelings with so much more precision. And just appreciating the incredible depth and subtlety that language gives us to describe, well, everything, the world, ourselves.
It's about making more intentional, more effective choices with the words we use. Every word is an opportunity to be understood more accurately.
To capture a feeling or a situation with real fidelity, as you said earlier.
Right.
So maybe think about how often in just everyday conversation or writing, we reach for the easy general word, when maybe a more specific synonym with its unique history or precise connotation could paint a much clearer, more accurate, more impactful picture.
It's a good challenge for all of us.
What subtle distinctions in language might you start listening for, or maybe trying out yourself after exploring all this with us today?
The path to more precise expression, it's always there, always open for exploration.
Keep exploring the fascinating world of words.